Hello, friends, and welcome to the second week of this semester of Opera 101, or Introduction to Opera. I'm Dr. Tedrin Blair Lindsay on the faculty of University of Kentucky Opera Theater, and on behalf of our department and our support organizations, OperaLex and the Bravo Guild, welcome to our lecture series. Last week, we spent the time discussing how composers wrote beautiful duets for voice types of the same gender. This week, we're going to explore the duets that composers wrote for voices of the opposite gender. So, as you might surmise, you're in for a lot of romantic love duets today, although maybe not entirely. Last week, we started with Mozart's opera Così fan tutte, and we're going to do the same today. We heard a soprano and a mezzo-soprano duet and a tenor and a baritone duet last week. Now we're going to hear them in combination with each other. In this plot, the two boyfriends of these sisters play a mean trick on them and come back having pretended to go to war. They come back in disguise and woo each other's girlfriends to try and test their constancy. And to their eventual dismay, both of the girls give in to their very convincing wooing. And we're going to hear the duets in which this happens with both couples. The first one is a little lighter and more comic in nature. This is the mezzo-soprano and the baritone as they check each other's pulse and feel each other's heartbeat and give each other their hearts. It's called Il Core Vi Dono, I Give You My Heart. And in this production, the baritone is Simon Keenlyside, and the mezzo-soprano is Susan Graham. Then we're going to hear the more serious and ardent love duet in which the soprano gives way to the tenor. And this duet is called Fra gli Amplessi. Fiordiligi has actually put herself in disguise as a soldier to go off to war and find her real boyfriend, but instead the tenor comes on just as she's about to leave and woos her so much that she finally gives in. These are the great American soprano and tenor Carol Van Ness and Jerry Hadley. So you'll hear how first Mozart gives a sort of comic rendition of a love duet to the lower voices, and then a more serious, ardent one to the higher voices.
Il cuore vi dono, pellido mio, ma il vostro vo anch'io, fiadatelo a me. Nel datelo prendo, ma il mio mi rendo. ridendo, furbetta. Non guardar.
A world without the operas of Mozart would be much poorer indeed, would it not? Last week we heard a couple of duets by the bel canto composer Bellini. This week I want us to hear a couple of duets by another bel canto composer, Donizetti. And in case you're wondering about this term bel canto, it's the Italian for beautiful singing. And it is beautiful singing, hopefully all singing is, but this has come to be a school of singing, a style period, if you will, between Mozart and Verdi. So sort of Italian opera in the first half of the 1800s generally is known by this name. And as I said last week, it's famous for having beautiful long lyric lines as well as flashy coloratura or passage work that really shows off the voice. And when you've got two voices doing that, so much the better. Donizetti was a genius at writing both comic opera and serious opera, so we're going to hear examples of each. Let's start with the comic opera first. This is from his The Elixir of Love, and the man, Nemorino, is drunk and trying to impress the girl that he thinks doesn't love him. Her name is Adina. She does love him, but she's really put off by his behavior at this point. And so he's taunting her, saying, "You always act like you're the queen of everything. Esulti pur la Barbara." And this is one of opera's great romantic couples, not the characters, but the singers, Angela Giorgio and Roberto Alagna. As Adina and Nemorino. I know you'll enjoy this very flamboyant version of this duet.
Sto
io spero.
Con quell'antico fuoco
Si estinguerà fra poco. Ancora un giorno solo. Il core guarirà.
davvero me ne consolo, ma pure si vedrà.
Un giorno solo.
Si vedrà.
Esulti pur la Barbara del poco alle mie pene.
Sarmoriano stolido, gettare i suoi carte.
Domani avranno termine, domani m'amerà.
Proprio del solido, il sole sentirà.
Esulti pur la Barbara.
Sarmoriano stolido,
Esulti pur la Barbara del poco alle mie pene. Domani avranno termine, domani m'amerà. Domani avranno termine, domani m'amerà.
bravi più dei soli, dove soli sentirà.
Sì, sì, che m'amerà, sì, sì, che m'amerà. Un giorno solo. Uno sol. Sì, sì, esulti pur la Barbara per poco alle mie pene.
Sarmoriano stolido, gettare i suoi carte.
Domani avranno termine, domani m'amerà.
Proprio del solido, il sole sentirà.
Esulti pur la Barbara.
Sarmoriano stolido,
Esulti pur la Barbara per poco alle mie pene. Domani avranno termine, domani m'amerà. Domani avranno termine, domani m'amerà.
bravi più dei soli, dove soli sentirà.
Sì, sì, che m'amerà, sì, sì, che m'amerà, sì, m'amerà, sì, m'amerà, sì, m'amerà.
Now let's turn from the fun comic Donizetti to the more serious, darker side of his art. This is from his tragedy Lucia di Lammermoor, where Lucia is betrothed to her brother's enemy. The enemy's name is Edgardo. And in this duet at the end of Act 1, Scene 2, the two of them pledge their troth to one another, although it's going to, of course, end in disaster. We're not going to hear the whole scene because, just like we discussed last week, often composers will write what's really a duet scene, and then the two people actually sing together toward the end of that scene as it reaches its climax. In the interest of time, we're going to hear the climax of this scene, the very beautiful and famous duet, Verranno a te sull'aure, They Will Come to You on the Dawn. And in this, we have two of the greatest opera singers of all time, Dame Joan Sutherland and tenor Alfredo Kraus. Please enjoy this incredible vocalism.
pensando ch'io di gemiti mi posso evitare. Spargi una ora lagrima su questo pegno, su questo pegno, su questo pegno, su quel
Oh my word, isn't that just a stunning performance of glorious music? I wish we could hear the whole opera sung by those two. Instead, though, let's move on now to some duets by Verdi. We mentioned last week how Verdi learned a lot from his bel canto predecessors in terms of structuring these duet scenes in the way that we've discussed, but also Verdi inherited the bel canto style, the agile, florid singing, and the lyrical long lines of singing. And nowhere in his operas does he put this to more explicit use than in his fantastic Rigoletto. And so I want us to hear two duets from this opera. In fact, they take place in the same scene. First, Rigoletto comes home to his daughter Gilda, and they greet each other, "Figlia, mio padre." And we'll hear part of that duet between the two of them. You'll hear the variety of musical invention as the conversation between them progresses. And then later in the scene, after Rigoletto has gone, Gilda, unbeknownst to her father, is seeing on the side a young man, at this point all quite innocently. She thinks he's a student. He's actually Rigoletto's employer, the Duke of Mantua, who is a famous, or rather infamous, womanizer. Anyway, that's whom Gilda has fallen in with. And we hear the duet in that same scene where the Duke, in disguise as the student, comes to woo her, and they have a love duet, and then they see that there are people outside, and so he rushes off lest their tryst be discovered. So we'll hear these two duets in quick succession. These are from a film version of Rigoletto, starring Ingvar Wiksel as the title character and Edita Gruberova as Gilda. And then in the second duet, you'll hear the great Luciano Pavarotti as the Duke. You'll notice that Verdi is able to show gradations of these characters through the variety of music, not just pretty tunes.
Figlia,
mia madre,
a te t'appresso, trova sol gioia il cuore oppresso. Mia vita sei, senza te in terra, qual bene avrei. Oh, figlia mia,
voi sospirate e mangi tanto, lo dite a questa povera figlia. Sera di sera per si affranca, ella conosca la sua famiglia.
tu non ne hai,
Qual nome avete?
a te che importa. Non firmai, oh ben tu fai. Non parlare al misero del suo perduto bene. Ella sentia quell'angelo pietà delle mie pene. Sodo, difforme, povero, per compassione mia moria, le zolle copriano e mi quel capo amato. Sola tu resti al misero. Dio si ringraziato.
Quando dolor che esprime rose amaro pianto può.
So,
Quando
la
dolor,
so, la re,
esprime
si tu sola resti al misero, sola resti al misero, sola tu resti, ringraziato, si tu sola resti al misero, sola resti al misero, non marmi è inutile, padre ti sono e basti, e forse a mondo temo alcuno corse gli asti, altri mi maledicono.
Patria, parenti, amici, voi dunque non avete.
Patria, parenti, amici, colto, famiglia, la patria, il mio universo, un universo in te. Colto, famiglia, la patria, il mio universo in te. Il mio universo in te. Sì, caro accento, un puro schiù di micel di contento.
È vero, ma per mio cuore di te rispondere, nessuno.
Son io con l'anima che ti rispondo a due che amano santo tutto un mondo. S'angelo demone, che importa a te? Io t'amo.
Uscite.
Uscire adesso, ora che accendere un fuoco stesso. Ah, inseparabile d'amore il Dio, stringeva, o vergine, tuo fato al mio. E il sole dell'anima, la vita e amore, sua voce il palpito del nostro core, e fama e gloria, potenza e trono, umane e fragili, qui cose sono. Una pura bene, sola divina, e amor che agli angeli più ne avvicina. Oh, adunque amiamoci, donna celeste, ed invidia gli uomini, solo per te, d'invidia gli uomini, sarò per te. Che m'ami, ripetimi.
Non
dice?
Il nome vostro ditemi, saperlo non mi lice.
Il loco è qui. Mi nomino Gualtier Maledè, studente sono e povero.
Rumor di passi fuori! Forse mio padre!
A cogliere potessi il traditore che ci disturba.
Motivo di qual passione? Morire!
Dimamerai tu
E voi?
l'intera vita, poi addio, addio, speranza e d'anima.
Addio, addio, speranza e d'anima.
Sol tu sarai, sarai per me. Sol tu sarai, sarai per me. Addio, addio. Addio, addio. Vivrò immutabile l'affetto mio per te, sì. Per te sì, vivrò immutabile l'affetto mio per te. Vivrà immutabile l'affetto mio per te. Addio, 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 speranza sarai per me. Addio, 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 addio,
That is what makes opera so magnificent. The fact that a composer like Verdi can use music not just to entertain us with the thrilling sounds, but to actually communicate a story and to portray character through his art. Certainly Puccini learned how to do that, and as we said last week, from Verdi having learned so much from the bel canto composers, and then Puccini in turn from Verdi, he certainly learned how to structure duet scenes in this long-standing way from Verdi. In Act 1 of La Bohème, Puccini actually writes a whole aria for the tenor, and then a whole aria for the soprano, and finally a duet for the two of them, in which they can express their mutual attraction for one another and how quickly they're falling in love. And Puccini even lets the duet end as they're walking out to join their friends from offstage on glorious high seas. This is O Soave Fanciulla from Puccini's La Bohème, and the Mimi is sung by Fiamma Izzo d'Amico, and Pavarotti is the Rodolfo, the tenor.
O soave fanciulla, o dolce viso, di vite sir confusa al guardar. In terra viso, in sol che vorrei sempre sognare. E al ritorno
curioso
dammi il braccio mia piccina
obbedisco, signor.
che mani di
Io t'amo.
Doesn't that just make you want to be young and fall in love all over again? It certainly does me. Well, apart from our first duet today, we haven't heard any mezzo-sopranos yet, although we've heard a couple of baritones. So let's throw some mezzos into the mix now. And Puccini was only one of several Italian composers in the Verismo school, or the style of opera that depends on overflowing abundant melody while telling stories of sort of low-class passions, if I can put it that way. One of Puccini's greatest compatriots was Pietro Mascagni, who wrote one of the most beloved operas ever, Cavalleria Rusticana, which is Italian for rustic chivalry. And in this opera, Turiddu, the young man, has thrown over the girl who gave it up for him, Santuzza, and on Easter morning, she confronts him and begs him to come back to her. She's been excommunicated from the church. She's now considered the town harlot, and her life is ruined because of him, and she's begging him to make an honest woman of her, and what's more, to return her love. Well, he's in love with a married man's wife, and so he's no longer interested in her and tells her in no uncertain terms. And so finally, at the end of this duet, when she sees that it's hopeless, she curses him and wishes him on Easter Sunday a cursed Easter. And sure enough, he dies minutes later in the opera. That's an opera for you. Well, in this fantastically dramatic portrayal of the duet, I know you're going to thrill to the histrionics of one of my favorite mezzo-sopranos, Fiorenzo Cosotto, who is partnered so ably in this scene by the great Placido Domingo. For our next mezzo-soprano duet, let's turn to French opera and the wonderful composer Jules Massenet. We'll hear a couple of examples from his operas. First, this is from Werther, in which Charlotte, the mezzo-soprano, is married and trying to ward off the persistent wooing of a young poet, Werther, who's a tenor. And she has tried to make their friendship understood as platonic, but he finally does uncover in her a germ of actual erotic passion, which she still intends to deny him, and does. She's extremely virtuous, and yet you'll see in this scene and hear in this music how tormented she is by this man's persistent wooing. These are two great contemporary singers, mezzo-soprano Joyce Di Donato and tenor Vittorio Grigolo.
Je vais pas, hélas, ce désespoir, ce deuil, on dirait, il me semble.
Ciel, je m'oublie, dans cette vacuum, dans cette vacuum de l'âme, que je vois, je n'aveugle que je lis.
Oh, taisez-vous.
Pourquoi m'en essayer de nous tromper encore? Fanno monter entre quand nous disons vainqueur d'un immortel amour qui touchera nos cœurs. À ce qu'on devait-je, au rêve mon vie, bonheur tant espéré, qu'aujourd'hui j'en vois.
My favorite opera by Massenet is his Thais, which tells the story from the ancient world of a courtesan, Thais, who is pursued relentlessly by a Christian priest, Athanael, until she finally succumbs and converts to Christianity, joins a convent, and then to his utter horror, he discovers he can't get her out of his mind, and not her divine immortal soul, but her gorgeous fleshly physical body. He goes to the convent to try and talk her out of her position as his convert, and instead she dies praising God, and he watches in despair as he basically loses his soul in the bargain of having won hers. It's a magnificent reversal of fortune, this ironic end of Thais. And the music throughout the opera is just exquisite, and no more so than in the glorious end of the opera. We're not going to hear the whole scene, but we're going to hear the part where they're singing together. This is the wonderful pairing of Renee Fleming and Thomas Hampson.
Oh,
We've heard a lot of heavy, serious duets here for the last few, so I want to move now to one of the most scintillating comic duets any composer has ever written for the stage. This isn't technically from an opera, it's from an operetta. An operetta is an opera with spoken dialogue instead of sung recitative, but other than that, it's a piece of classical music for singers that tells a story, just like an opera. This is the most famous operetta of them all, Johann Strauss Jr.'s Die Fledermaus, or The Bat. In this duet, the protagonists are in disguise from one another at a party, and they've both already had quite a bit to drink, and they're both looking for a little adventure outside of their marriage. She recognizes him, he doesn't recognize her. And so in the course of this famous watch duet, she notices that he has this beautiful pocket watch, which she slyly appropriates through the course of their flirtation. And of course, since she has the watch, it's going to lead to his downfall later on in the third act. Well, downfall, it's a comic opera, so it's not really a downfall so much as a comeuppance. Anyway, I know that you will enjoy this magnificent concert performance by Carita Mattila and Hakan Hagegard of Strauss's Watch Duet.
Anstand, so mannig, diese Teile fein und zierlich, und das Küssen, das mit Küsse, genügen man bedenken soll, es ist nur erlauben Wort.
Immer Reste, und wir sich aufs Beste, denkt uns Küssen, schlagt uns Büßen, warte nur, du Bösewicht, du entgehst der Strafe nicht, du entgehst der Strafe nicht.
Ach, wie leicht könnt es entschrieben, dies holde Zauber nimmt, willst du nicht die Maske heben, wie dein Antlitz mir verhüllt.
Ei, mein schöner Herr, ich bitte, nicht verwegen, nichts berührt, denn es heißt die gute Sitte, dass man Masken respektiert. Wir gehen,
An der Birne,
kokettieren,
an der Rühre,
wir sprechen richtig
sie von mir,
Nein,
lass doch sehen, ob sie mir, ob sie widersteht.
ja, was will ich?
Aber wer ist
Sie-
Präsident?
Kann man das so immer repetieren.
Wie will die Musik, Alexi, meine Uhr?
Ich danke von Herzen,
Ich wollte nur...
Ihnen zu scherzen.
Sie ist nicht meine Uhr hätte ich sie nur. Diese Stadt ist etwas teuer, aber mit dem Ungeheuer. Meine Uhr ist Alexi.
That's a little bit hot and racy, isn't it? It's not every day you see an opera singer drop a pocket watch down her ample cleavage. But such is this operetta. How fun that is. But now, in ending, let's move from the ridiculous to the sublime. Certainly the greatest love opera ever written is Wagner's Tristan und Isolde. And I can make that claim because if for no other reason, it has the longest love duet any composer ever put in an opera. Liebesnacht, or Night of Love, lasts for 40 minutes during Act 2. We are not going to hear all 40 minutes now. I've chosen 2 5-minute excerpts from different parts of the duet for you to hear and get a flavor of Wagner's vast panorama of love and desire as portrayed in this opera. You'll notice from the subtitles in this production that Wagner very Freudianly combines the ideas of night and death and darkness and love all together. And in this very interesting production from the Bayreuth Festival, you'll hear 2 of the greatest Wagnerian singers of modern times, Siegfried Jerusalem as Tristan and Waltraud Meyer as Isolde. I leave you with this today because anything I say after you hear the climax of this duet would be an afterthought. So next week we'll explore some of opera's great trios, but for now I want to leave you with what probably is opera's greatest love duet. See you next week.